This week on ICN, the stories you should have heard, but didn't. Nevada sheriff gets the feds to back down over property rights battle with rancher. Police try to scare citizens into not videotaping incidents. The First Lady requires 27 attendants paid for by taxpayers. Congressman Pete Stark steps in it again. Those stories and more next on Informed Citizen News. Hello and welcome to ICN, Informed Citizen News, the week of August 8th, 2010. The old cowboy westerns in their greatest glory often showed the local sheriff as the lone representative of the law. The sheriff was there to keep the peace so that law-abiding citizens could go about their daily business. A modern take on that image comes from Nye County, Nevada, from none other than a transplanted New Yorker no less. Sheriff Joe DeMeo retired from the New Jersey police force and moved out west. He ran for and won election to Nye County Sheriff in 2002. Sheriff DeMeo takes his oath to the U.S. and Nevada state constitution so seriously that every action he takes or order he gives must first meet with the constitutional standard. And he isn't shy about letting people know it.
One of the responsibilities we have as constitutional office holders is ensuring that our people, our deputies, and those that are within Nye County, especially those in law enforcement, observe the Constitution, because that is the law of the land. We also have a state constitution as well, which we're also responsible for upholding. One of the great responsibilities that we have is protection of our constituency. And sometimes that involves being the buffer and intermediary with the federal government.
Sheriff DeMeo came to ICN's attention through videos posted on YouTube, describing how he intervened to protect one citizen's property rights against what he determined to be illegal attempted cattle seizures by the federal government. In these videos, Sheriff DeMeo describes the dispute and how the federal agencies were acting outside their authority. Take a look at a few scenes from the interview.
She has come to a resolution how we can manage and take care of Wayne Hage's problems with the cattle and the seizure and the federal managed lands, which it's public lands. It's not really, they're not owned by the federal government. They're actually public lands, which are owned by the people. The federal government under the BLM, which is the Bureau of Land Management, which was formed in 1946. From the combination of the Grazing Office and the General Land Office, formed this management office. The federal government doesn't own the lands; are actually within the state of Nevada. The state of Nevada, as I understand, hasn't given those lands to the federal government. They're within the state of Nevada, and I believe the state of Nevada actually has sovereignty on those lands. That's my belief, and what I believe as far as the states' rights issues and the 10th Amendment. That the power that we have, authority that we have, emanates from the people who we serve. It doesn't come from us. It doesn't come from the government. It comes from the people we serve. Our forefathers were very clear in plain language to state that in our Declaration of Independence and plus our Constitution, and laying out the amendments to the Bill of Rights that follows the Constitution and in the Articles of the Constitution. A couple of months into my administration, I get a phone call from my lieutenant advising me that they were in the process of conducting a legal seizure and legal action against Wayne Hage, which I told them, I informed them that they would carry out my orders and making sure that no illegal action took place against a constituent or citizens of Nye County, and that any unlawful action from the federal government would result in an arrest by the people that are there. And at that time I was informed that they were in contact with a U.S. attorney, and that the U.S. attorney was advising them that, advising the members of Nye County Sheriffs and my lieutenant that if I didn't allow them to take these actions against Wayne Hage, that they were going to have a warrant for my arrest, which I said, I'll give my address and tell them I'll be waiting for them. It was up in the Northern Area Command, which informed me that the federal government was interested in seizing cattle, and they use any means necessary, including armed federal agents, which I informed my deputy to notify that member of that federal agency that if they brought any armed federal agents to Nye County to conduct an illegal search and seizure, that they would be faced with the Nye County Sheriff's Office SWAT team as well, and then we'd be standing between them and my constituent, and to advise them that nothing was going to take place, and if they conduct any kind of illegal action, that they would be placed under arrest. And that goes across the board. You know, we placed members of my office under arrest. I didn't see any reason for us not to be able to arrest a member of a federal authority if they're conducting an illegal search and illegal seizure. And that action didn't take place. Apparently, I didn't know if they were posturing. The deputy didn't know if they were posturing as well. But shortly thereafter, we didn't have any more issues with BLM.
The series of 3 videos is interesting and educational to watch. The viewer can get a sense of the legal relationship between county, state, and federal jurisdictions. But most importantly, the county sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer in your community. If your sheriff, like Sheriff Memo, knows the Constitution and the state law, then the sheriff can be a force for the protection of life, liberty, and property rights. Most recently, Sheriff Memo arrested the Nye County District Attorney for misappropriation of funds. The DA refused to press charges against himself, and a special prosecutor is being brought in to look at the case. The links to Sheriff Memo's interview are listed in our news source section. Law enforcement is turning up the heat and the intimidation on those who videotape them in public. There are several recent cases where police have arrested camera-wielding citizens. The district attorneys claim that wiretapping laws are being violated by private citizens taping police in action. One incident involved a motorcycle rider with an obvious helmet cam where he recorded his own traffic stop. He later posted the incident on YouTube. Shortly thereafter, police raided his home and seized all camera and computer equipment. He was charged with felony wiretapping violations and faces 16 years in prison. Another incident was in Florida, where a mother was filming her son being questioned by police. She too was arrested and charged. Unlikely to obtain convictions in these cases, as these tapings occurred in public, law enforcement is clearly trying to intimidate citizens to discourage them from documenting their actions. Our liberties depend on keeping those in power in check. The video camera is an effective way to ensure that police perform to the highest level and maintain the trust of the public. Law enforcement should have nothing to hide. During our last show, we featured 38-year veteran Congressman Pete Stark bragging that our borders are secure. This week, we share another bold claim from the same distinguished gentleman from California.
And when you tell somebody you have a right to get a service from another, that's essentially saying you get to make that person do something for you. And sir, that is a form of slavery. So my question is, how can this law be constitutional? But more importantly than that, if they can do this, what can't they? Is your question they can do any? Is your answer that they can do anything?
The federal government, yes, can do most anything in this country.
You, sir, and people that think like you are destroying this nation.
This from a man who has officially affirmed his oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States 19 times since 1972, a document that is quite clear on the limitations of the federal government. As we often see, those who have sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution only show a vague familiarity with the founding document. The Congressional Budget Office released an 8-page brief on the debt crisis America is facing. It's a good report for those just learning about the financial predicament of our country. The brief contains descriptions of the recent debt meltdowns in Ireland and Greece as a possible roadmap for America. It's an easy read and recommended for those who wish to get a foundation on how government debt can get quickly out of hand. We've included a link to the report in our news source section. Serving in public office should be a noble sacrifice, but nowadays it is more akin to winning the lottery. Numerous politicians make most of their wealth after they win an election. What doesn't capture enough attention is the opulence and lifestyle lived by those in elected office. It's not the salary, which is typically in the low 6-figure range, but the budget allocated to the elected official that provides this first-class living. A typical congressman has a staff of 14 and an annual budget of $10 million. Government-owned private jets fly them home on weekends or on so-called research trips. This week, when our unelected First Lady was photographed vacationing in Spain, spending hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars, we learned that she has a staff of 27 attendants. Not unique to this administration, the First Lady's number of assistants has grown with each successive president. The U.S. Constitution prohibits the government from issuing titles of nobility, but elected officials aren't complaining as long as they get their perks. The next time you stick a barrel outside to collect rainwater, you could be breaking the law. Several states, such as Utah, Washington, and Colorado, have laws either restricting or prohibiting collection of rainwater on your own property. These laws are rarely enforced, but when they are, it is usually for the state to enact control over a person or their business. With recent state enforcement actions catching the public's attention, pressure is coming to bear on government representatives to update or remove these laws as an obvious infringement on private property. The Washington Times reported on an Obama administration memo that essentially provides backdoor amnesty to persons illegally in this country. The memo sent to the Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services outlines ways to reduce the threat of removal. Methods such as parole in place, deferred action, and notice to appear would allow an illegal immigrant to avoid deportation. The Obama administration downplayed the contents of the memo and suggested that it did not reflect policy. In a Los Angeles Times article titled "Cops Show Marines How to Take on the Taliban," active military rode along with police in Los Angeles neighborhoods notorious for gang activity. 70 Camp Pendleton Marines participated in the training exercise that aims to adapt the investigative techniques the LAPD has used for decades against violent street gangs. The article describes how the Marines are taking on the Taliban more as a violent drug gang and not as an insurgency. The Marines were just observing the police in action and dressed in civilian clothes to avoid possible accusations of military policing American streets. The Chinese president stated that the world needs an objective, fair, and reasonable standard for rating sovereign debt. The stock and housing meltdowns over the last 10 years has forever tarnished long-standing ratings agencies Moody's and Standard & Poor's. These companies have long since been ridiculed for overrating companies' and countries' debt. China's rating agency made its first foray into sovereign debt by listing the United States in the third tier, while countries like China, Germany, and Singapore received the highest grades. The Chinese agency stated that those countries who create wealth should be rewarded with higher credit ratings. As the largest creditor in the world, China is just beginning to throw its weight around. A quick update: ICN is progressing toward our goal of launching a website and expanding news services in October. As we get closer to October, we'll share more details. From all of us at Informed Citizen News, see you next time.